Hi, I'm Kerry. I'm from Hope for Justice. It's a real honour to be here with you all today, joining in this career panel event, exploring work that's related to the humanitarian sector. Hello to everybody online as well. Thanks so much for having me. I've also been joined by some of my sneaky colleagues who have snuck in at the back, who have made this way more nerve-wracking than I think it would have been if I'd just been talking to you. So I'm just going to shape the next 10 minutes of my talk around three key questions. I'm going to start off thinking about who I am. So I'm just going to start off telling you a little bit about me, my background, where I've come from, that's led me to where I am today. Then I'm going to tell you about what I do. So what I do today and what I've done in previous work that has led to the position and the role that I'm in within Hope for Justice. And then I'm going to round off by thinking about why do I do what I do? And I'm actually going to use an illustration from one of my colleagues for that bit as well. Yeah, of course. Still got the bar on. Do you want that one?
Don't think we can really.
Okay, that's fine. So as I said, I'm Kerry. I'm from a Scottish family. I was born in Zambia and I grew up in Zambia. My dad worked for the Overseas Development Association. I grew up in a big family and it was a family. Hi, welcome. That's okay. It was a big family full of women apart from my dad. Even the dog was a female. And today I'm really passionate about women's issues. I don't know whether there's a connection between the two, but I would suggest that there is a connection between the two. I am married to Ben, who is a criminal prosecution lawyer, which makes for some very interesting conversations when the world of modern slavery overlaps with the world of crime in his work. And I've got 3 teenagers, one of whom is exploring universities and thinking about Manchester. So that's quite exciting to be here. My undergraduate degree was in community and health development. And since then, I've gone back to university 4 times, not because I'm a natural academic, but just because I love to learn. So I'll expand a little bit more on that as I go as well. I've had a very varied career path, which has moved in and out of different sectors. And I think that that has shaped my career quite strongly in terms of what I bring to the roles that I do. So I started out in the health service, working in health promotion, so really interested in Michelle's work as well there. I moved into education, working in the primary sector, where I worked in school leadership and then in the advisory service. I had an extensive career break with my 3 children, which was an absolute privilege, which was extended slightly longer by COVID, probably slightly more than most parents would have liked at the time. And then I moved into the charity sector, and that's where I've ended up today working with Hope for Justice. So why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you this because I think that your circumstances in life determine what it is that you do. I think who you are determines and shapes the opportunities that you have and the experiences that you bring, and therefore then falls into what you then do as a role. And I'm going to use that as a thread throughout the next 10 minutes to demonstrate what I mean. So what do I do? Oh, are we frozen? I'll just... Oh, thank you. I work for Hope for Justice. I'll just give you a little bit of context to who we are at Hope for Justice. Hope for Justice is an international NGO. We work in 11 different localities over 4 continents. We were established in 2008. We've got about 350 people that work for our organisation across the world, and we specialise specifically in modern slavery and human trafficking. That is the only remit in which we work. We work with both adults and children in different localities. And we work right from the point of identification, so working to identify people who are in circumstances of exploitation, and that's a really complex area. People don't readily come forward and recognise themselves that they're necessarily being exploited, or they're too fearful of that. We also run programmes which are focused on that very early support. So what are the most important safety and health needs for that individual as they exit their situation of exploitation? We have extensive, well-developed programmes which are specialising as well in long-term recovery, and I'll talk a little bit more about that today. And we're really committed to bringing about systemic change. So we take the work that we do on the front line in our programmes, and we use that to advocate at a government level in all of the countries in which we work. We address policy issues and legislation issues, looking to drive systemic change that can make things better in terms of the response to survivors of modern slavery, but also, more importantly, work to prevent it from happening in the first place. We also work with large businesses, which is done through our sister company, Slave Free Alliance. And the role of Slave Free Alliance is to focus specifically on Section 54 of the Modern Slavery Act, which is about supply chains. So that's another area of our work, which again links in with humanitarian response, but is specifically looking at the business side of things. So to give you an idea of scale, in 2023, we reached just over 200,000 children and adults through the work that we do across the globe. My role here in the UK is Director of Programmes and UK Policy. And basically, what that means is I get to stand here and take the glory of all the work that the frontline teams do, which is just such an honour to do. I have incredible people that work within UK programmes. We've got 3 main areas of work that we deliver in the UK. All of our work is with adult survivors of modern slavery. We have our UK Hubs work, which is embedded in local communities, working in partnership with other organisations across different sectors to respond to the identification and prevention of modern slavery. So looking to build a stronger community response to modern slavery at a local level. We have a UK advocacy team, and they, that's my colleagues that are with me today, they specialise in the long-term programme. So their role is about expert socio and legal advocacy, independent advocacy for survivors. So they work for the survivor, helping them to navigate the systems and make sure that they can access the things that they're entitled to make sure that they can carry on their journey of recovery as they choose to do. So a really significant part of the work, and the long-term response to survivors is something that still remains to be quite underdeveloped within the UK. And then the third area of our work is the research and policy, which is the reform of the systemic change. So my colleague Ewan there takes the learning from our frontline practitioners and uses that to underpin robust advocacy at a government level. And we've got some exciting work that he is pushing for us there in terms of how we respond in legislation to the issue of modern slavery. And that's a very interesting area to unpack, but I won't do that now just because of time. So what roles have I done in the past that have led me to this role in Hope for Justice today? As I said, I started in the health service. I then moved into education. In primary schools, I worked in schools in areas of high disadvantage. The children that came to the schools faced multiple challenges every day. And from there, I moved into school leadership and then into the advisory service, working with schools to raise pupil attainment, again, in schools that were, pupils were underachieving and not reaching the potential that they could reach. I then had my career break, as I said, and during that time took my first steps into the charity sector. So I volunteered as a trustee first and then became the chair for 5 years of a local charity. And it was when my youngest child started primary school at 5 that my vicar of the local church asked me if I could just help him out to set up a charity. And that was when my world and career into modern slavery first began. So he and his wife had been left a legacy, always lovely to have a pot of money to start with, makes life a little bit easier. And close to their heart was the issue of modern slavery. So for me, it was a new area. I hadn't worked in that area before, didn't know very much about it. They wanted the response to be based in Norwich, in Norfolk. They wanted to build a local response in which the church community could engage, but they also wanted for work to be in partnership with an organisation called Big Life in Kolkata. So a very, very diverse remit. And that took quite a lot of creative thinking on my part to identify what the charity was going to be about. And so I started off that by doing some research into the local communities in which we were working, understanding the local context, understanding modern slavery specifically within that context, to identify what was it that we could bring. So we weren't duplicating something else was doing or creating competition with another charity, but what was the gap that we could bring to the response. So in Norwich, we worked with people that we considered were slipping through the nets of the structures and systems that were designed to help them. And they were people that were either at high risk of exploitation or people who had been exploited. And we devised a bespoke programme to work with them. It was a 3-form structure of programme around each individual. So each individual worked with a mentor, and they worked with the individual on the kind of bigger life stuff like stable housing, finances, employment, that sort of stuff. We also provided a befriender, And the befriender was absolutely key, because a lot of the people we were working with lived on the margins of the community and found it very difficult to integrate and very difficult to recognise and build healthy relationships. And it's important in this type of work that we don't create a dependency on the charity, that they are actually able to move on from the support that you're giving and live independently in the community, but to have a safe network to fall back on when life derails, as it does for all of us all of the time. And the third team in this triangle of support were the practical helpers, who were volunteers who just gave practical support, such as fixing a bike for someone, or giving someone a lift to a medical appointment, or helping them write a CV, or taking a meal, those kind of practical things which underpinned the work that the mentor and the befriender were doing, which were more intense roles. In contrast, in Kolkata, we worked with Big Life on two areas of work that they were already doing, both focused on prevention of modern slavery. The first piece was we developed for them a tool, which was a story booklet called Sajil's Story, that you can actually see on the screen. Sajil's Story was a simple story, but it depicted the true story of a girl that we'd worked with in Mumbai. And she had gone from her rural community into the city to find employment. She dreamt of being a nurse, and she had been taken into trafficking and ended up being exploited through sex trafficking. And it was her story that we then wrote a booklet around. And Big Life used this tool to go into rural communities in the surrounding areas of Kolkata in West Bengal, to use it as a tool to basically open up conversations with families and communities, to start to talk about the real risks when young people went to the city, which was Kolkata in that context. And we had the privilege of going with them on some of those visits. The second area of work that we supported for Big Life was street schools, so working with children who were living on the streets with their families, or sometimes on their own, at extremely high risk of being trafficked. And the schools were designed to help the children just attain that basic level of education in order to be able to enter the government school systems, again, as a preventative issue for these children to start to open up opportunities for them. So the third question, why do I do what I do? Well, the simple answer is I do it because people matter. The more complex answer, I think, is, as I started with, what I do, I think, is based on who I am and what drives me. And I'm actually going to illustrate this by talking about somebody else, because I think she's more interesting than I am. So just bear with me a minute. There is a point to what I'm doing. So I'm just going to introduce Elle. She's actually here with us today. Elle is one of our independent modern slavery advocates, as I talked about earlier in our long-term work that we do with adult survivors. Elle's specialist role is in the transition for young adults as they move from children's services into adult services. And she works with those young adults, advocating for them as they leave children's services into adult services. And this is a time that we refer to as a cliff edge time. Many, many 18-year-olds at that point just kind of fall off the edge. They face multiple disadvantages often. They're still navigating significant trauma. There isn't a well-built transition between adult services and children's services. And unfortunately, and really tragically, they then become prey again to organised crime groups who target that particular age group. So Elle's work is about working with the professionals in children's services and adult services and building that bridge between the two and encouraging the young person to understand what their rights and entitlements are, to make choices, and then she helps them to communicate those choices with those professionals that they're working with. So a really fundamental role. But the other thing I want to illustrate about Elle, as an example of who we are in our roles is unique to us, is that Elle brings with her a really strong conviction to challenge what is kind of fundamental narrative behind modern slavery. So for a long time, and you'll still hear it now, people talk about modern slavery just being a progression from transatlantic slavery. And Elle has quite rightly brought this narrative which underpins our sector to the fore within our team. And she's leading our UK programmes team at the moment. She's working to provide a safe space that we can talk about that, and we can think about that, and we can unpick it, and we can start to work together to understand, why does that matter? Why does the narrative behind an issue like modern slavery matter, and how does it relate to the way that we respond to that issue? And Elle knows that as she raises this, this is something that really matters to the young people she works with as well. It's not just an issue she's passionate about. And obviously it's hugely significant. One of them is about crime and one of them is about institutional racism. So it's really important that the discourse that underpins the work that we do aligns with the way that we respond to it, and vice versa. So not only is Elle bringing expertise in terms of as an independent advocate, specialising in modern slavery, she also brings a drive in her to challenge some of the things that others of us haven't really thought through or really thought about, which are really fundamental to how we combat and dismantle modern slavery. And they're pieces of the jigsaw that only Elle can bring. They're not pieces of the jigsaw that I can bring. So for me, people matter, the same as for Elle. That's why I do it. Of the 2,106 survivors, adults and children that we've worked with through Hope for Justice, every one of them matters. Every one of them has the right to draw on their circumstances, their opportunities, their life experiences, to unpack what does a career for them mean. And that's what drives me. So although Elle and I both work within the modern slavery sector, we both work within Hope for Justice, we both work within UK programmes, we bring to that very different experiences, very different opportunities that we can build on, very different skill sets. And it's together that we can work to dismantle modern slavery. But we're both driven by that same fundamental belief that people matter. So just to kind of bring that to a close, I would suggest that modern slavery is interrelated with all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. I would say that the Sustainable Development Goals actually are the push and pull factors that create an environment in which modern slavery can thrive and is thriving in the world today. It's not something that we can respond to through a particular siloed sector. It needs to be transcended across sectors. Modern slavery is about preying upon somebody's vulnerabilities. It's about using a person as a commodity, selling them over and over again in more than one way. And it's a crime that's constantly evolving. And people matter far too much for us to stand by and just let that happen. So the question for me that came from my vicar 9 years ago, would I just help out setting up a charity, completely changed the direction of my career path from where I was at the time. And I think, just to sum up, the questions that I think that we need to be asking when we're thinking about our career in the humanitarian sector is, what are the circumstances that you've had? What are the skills that you bring? Who are you? And what are the insights and experiences that drive you, that make you passionate about things? And they're the things that determine where you end up going. Thank you.